Welcome back. A poll conducted by the Democratic Alliance has revealed that its supporters were not against engaging in talks with the ANC. This according to Solim Simanga, who is with the party here in Gauteng. The poll further says coalition talks are welcome, but only under strict conditions for good governance and cleaning out corruption. Let's get some clarity on this now with John Steenhuisen, who is in fact the DA leader. In fact, before we get to that interview, let's give you some context around what Soli Msimanga had to say. So take a look.
With the ANC, if you want to then start having conversations with the ANC, as our, the polls are telling us and the voters are saying to us, they are saying to us, well, these are things that you need to be putting in place. There need to be checks and balances in terms of how you appointments are done. How do we then ensure that the SOEs, as an example, are to function? How do we then ensure that there is clear, guidelines in terms of, the program of government going forward? You can agree to that. Then we can talk.
Solly, sorry for stopping you. We're running out of time. I just want to confirm what you've just told us. You said that your voters are willing for you to open discussions with the ANC. Are you also saying that you are going to do that? Are you ready to start negotiating with the ANC on possible coalitions going into the 2024, specifically in your case, provincial Gauteng election?
Well, what you asked me is that have we listened? Have we listened to what the voters, and I'm saying there is a big portion of that is saying you can actually then consider that, but there is very, very clear, conditions.
Sure, but so what are you doing in response to that? Your voters telling you that?
Well, this is just something that happened quite recently. To be quite honest with you, it still needs to be taken to the federal council and from there, possibly even to Congress.
So that's Solim Simanga speaking during News 24's webinar there. John Steenhuisen is the leader of the DA. John, thank you so much for making time for us this afternoon. What is this recent DA poll that Solim Simanga is referring to that is encouraging you as the party to engage in coalition talks with the ANC?
Thank you, Clement, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you and the viewers today. First of all, it's not DA polling. It's independent polling that was done by an institution called the Social Research Foundation, which was presented to us at a federal executive meeting because we listened to voices across the spectrum. And one of the key takeaways there when it came to coalitions, that this institution's research had indicated that the worst case scenario for voters would be a tie-up between the ANC and the EFF, but that a tie-up with the DA and ANC would be far more preferable. So it's not internal DA polling that's been commissioned. It's an independent poll done by the Social Research Foundation, and I'm sure they'd be happy to come onto your show and take you through it the same way they took our federal executive through it a fortnight ago.
Yeah. And as the federal executive, what's your response to this kind of polling? Solim Simang suggested that this is something that will be taken to Congress to allow more DA supporters to decide on whether or not, as the Democratic Alliance, that should be your approach with the ANC.
Well, let me just make this very clear, that one of the reasons we're having a Congress next year is so that the leadership of the party has a mandate going into the 2024 elections and also into the negotiations that will be taking place post that. So what the Federal Congress would do is give the broad parameters about where we should be looking and what the possibilities are, but also what the red lines would be around negotiations. I think the next 18 months are going to be very, very fluid in our politics. I think there's a lot of road still to go. And what I'm not going to do is allow the DA to be pigeonholed into a position until we understand the full lie of the land. And that can only happen once the chips from the 2024 election fall where they may. But what I would say is that I will work back, certainly, as the leader of this organization, and if I am re-elected, that the worst case scenario for South Africa is an ANC-EFF tie-up, and that we would have to then move backwards from there to see what the least worst option would be after that. And I've made it very clear, and it's been carried in the Sunday Times and many other places, that we will talk to any party that shares the core values of the DA, non-racialism, respect for the rule of law and the Constitution, a market economy that treats business as a partner in the growth agenda, and a capable state free of cadre deployment and a right-sized civil service. If any party believes in those things, we're open to talks with them, and we will engage. So those are the parameters that exist at this stage.
Yeah.
And we will obviously, have a look at those going forward. And our federal Congress will give the leadership of this party the guidance that they would like to see us taking into the 2024 election.
Yeah, and as it stands now, John, from the conditions you've given now, right, respect for the rule of law, no cadre deployment, the right size of government, is it fair then to say the ANC as it stands right now is against those very conditions, in fact, don't meet those conditions that you mentioned? So is it fair to say at the moment the ANC is completely written off as a possible option?
Correct. The ANC was to abandon their policies of cadre deployment and the deployment of people into the civil service, to agree to the fundamental reform agenda. I've made it very, very clear that even in Parliament today, that we would support any initiatives that promoted the reform agenda in South Africa. As long as the ANC clings to these moribund policies, we're not going to breathe life into that carcass. If the ANC ditches those and starts to move firmly down the path of reform and demonstrates it, well, perhaps it's a consideration. But that's one of the main reasons why we're not in coalitions with the ANC in a number of municipalities and metros around the country, because they still fundamentally believe in that. And what I'm not going to do is allow the DA to become the MDC to Robert Mugabe's ZANU-PF, where you simply extend the life of a rotten institution, an organization, and you breathe new life into it. We're not going to do that. We're committed at this stage to bringing the ANC below 50% across the country, and wherever we can challenge for power to do so. We are committed to bringing the ANC below 50% in the next national government elections, and that is the mission at this stage, because there can be no break of the logjam in South African politics while the ANC retains a majority. And that's the focus of the DA over the next 18 months, heading into that particular election.
Yeah. I want to ask about the EFF, and we'll talk in a bit about the Congress coming up next year, because you just launched your campaign to be re-elected for the second term. But my first question on the EFF is, why did the federal executive decide to reject Mpho Phalatse's proposal last month to work with the EFF before even hearing her case and suggestion? Because she was only invited to make those representations after she expressed how unhappy she was about the proposal being considered and rejected without her being given the opportunity to present it.
But sorry, that is simply not true. Both myself as the leader and the federal executive chairperson, as well as the Gauteng leadership, were involved with her on a number of instances around whether we should work with the EFF or not. And there were many, many conversations around that. And I, in those conversations, had to remind the mayor that I had made an electoral commitment to the voters of the DA going into the local government election that there would be no deal with the EFF. And that going back on that would be doing what the Liberal Democrats did in the UK when they went back on the tuition fees promise. I'm a firm believer in standing by what you said, and I made that very, very clear.
Yeah.
The federal executive then discussed it, and the mayor was then given an opportunity to come and state her case, and the federal executive held to its term, no deals with the EFF, precisely because they do not tick any one of those boxes that I spoke about earlier. They have no respect for the rule of law and the Constitution. They don't believe in a market economy. They believe in a command economy. They don't believe in non-racialism. And they certainly, as we learnt in Johannesburg, in the previous time we were in an arrangement with them, certainly don't believe in rejecting cadre deployment and see the state as something available to capture to be able to serve your own ends. And so they are not a partner that is a good values fit for the DA at the rational center of South African politics, where I believe the DA needs to be standing like a road sign rather than a weather vane, pointing the way to the future.
So what is incorrect then? Are you saying it's incorrect to suggest that Mpho Phalatse was not given the opportunity to present her case?
No, I'm saying to you that there was plenty of opportunity to present her case to the federal leadership of the party and the provincial leadership of the party, which she did. She expressed a view that was then brought to the federal executive after she had indicated that she was not happy with the FedEx's decision, and she was given the opportunity to state her case. And the FedEx reaffirmed its decision that we will hold to our electoral pledge before the election that we would not do any deals with the EFF. And that is the decision that was made.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is, why was that decision made before she was presented with the opportunity? And I'm specific about the opportunity because she says this was the official conversation they had with caucus in Johannesburg, which actually, she said, supports the suggestion that they work with the EFF. So what I'm asking is, why was you as FedEx, why did you take the decision before she's given the opportunity?
With respect, I'm not sure what conversation you're talking about within Johannesburg, because certainly my engagements with that caucus had a very different outcome of that. So I'm not sure what engagement you're saying that said that we must all go into an alliance with the EFF. That's absolutely fundamentally not what that caucus said, and large parts of that caucus are implacably opposed to working with the EFF. So I'm not sure where
that's what Mpho Phalatse said, and what we'll do to our listeners is I'll find that clip and play it again, possibly after our interview. Mpho Phalatse told me that the Johannesburg caucus supports the idea for the DA to work with the EFF, and that's exactly the proposal that she was meant to give to you as FedEx, but you decided to have that conversation without her. And she said to me that she was disappointed that you as FedEx decided to make a decision about a report that she was not even given an opportunity to present before you.
Well, as I said to you, there was many discussions held with the federal leadership, with the mayor, and we discussed very clearly what the parameters were, and the decision-making process was completely in line with the way in which the Democratic Alliance's structures work.
So you are preparing for the DA Congress that's expected early next year. You've launched your campaign to be selected for the second term as leader of the party. What's your campaign message heading into that Congress? So in other words, why should DA members vote for you again?
Well, I've made it very, very clear that the party has come a very long way since 2019, when we essentially had leaders walking off the job. We had other people throwing the banner of the party onto the floor, and large parts of the media writing the DA off and signing its obituary. Today, we are up in the polls. We're back to winning ways. We've won 7 out of the 8 last by-elections with an average of 7% more than we got even in the 2021 elections. The big wipeout and write-off that many in the media and the commentariat had to say about the 2021 elections saw the DA emerging with 38 mayors around the country, and a situation now where 20 million people are under some form of DA government or the other. We've also been able to focus the party on issues that matter to ordinary South Africans, things like the cost of living, the rising crime rate, unemployment, and we've been able to put on the table workable solutions there. I would like to continue that work. I said at the time that we needed to fix the DA so that we could fix South Africa. I believe the DA is now back in fighting form, and we're ready to take the fight to fix South Africa. And I'd like to lead the party into that particular fight.
Do you think that you've managed to resolve the party's identity crisis? I remember your speech when you were elected at the last conference. You vowed to do everything to keep the DA true to its core principles. And there are some people who interpreted that as saying we're going to focus on what we've always been known to focus on, that whole perception about the DA being a white party. How would you say you've managed to resolve that kind of perception, especially during your first term?
Well, I think the conversation we had a little bit earlier shows just how firmly rooted we are in those values and principles, because they have now been the values and principles that have determined how we go into coalitions and what the guiding principles are for any coalition agreement. Secondly, the DA of today is the largest party in urban areas, and that's by independent polling, and that the majority of people who vote for the DA are not white South Africans. They're South Africans of other races. And I think that is a significant repudiation of the notion that the DA is a white party. We are by far the most diverse party in the country, and our leadership, our top six, is far more diverse than any of the other political parties in the spectrum in South Africa.
Will you be supporting Helen Zille for re-election?
Well, it would need to see who the other candidates are, but I think Helen's done a good job to date, and I think she's been able to steady the ship and to bring a set of values and principles and firmness to that office to make sure that we can keep the DA back on track.
And how has it been working with her in your first term? There are those who believe that she's been drowning you and taking the lead and not giving you the space to lead as the leader of the DA. And I remember she had promised when she came in that she's going to stay in her lane. Has she managed to do that?
Yes, of course. And I think that I'm not insecure like some of the other individuals who feel very threatened by her are. I think that she does an excellent job in the work that she does, and she absolutely has stayed in her lane, which is managing the day-to-day running of the party and ensuring that things move smoothly and processes like the Federal Legal Commission are moving together. We have a very good working relationship, and I look forward to continuing that work as we grow the party and ensure that it moves into the future. Yeah. But here's the thing. It's not my choice to make. This is not a party like some of the others in the political spectrum where leaders are hand-appointed by the leader of the party. We're all subject to democratic accountability within the organization, and so it will ultimately be up to the Congress delegates to decide who their leader is, who the chairperson of the federal executive is, and who the people that are going to be surrounding that leadership team are. And I think that's good and healthy to have that democratic accountability. I think what we should be asking is why other parties in the spectrum who preach accountability and democracy are yet to hold elective conferences to receive mandates from their leaders from their supporters.
How are you going to deal with the perception that some people have around the return of Helen Zille? And it's not just a perception some people have, but it's a perception and perhaps even the reality of some of the former leaders in the DA. I'm just thinking here about people like Musi Maimane, Funzile Ngobeni, Herman Mashaba, Paul Bogie, John Moody. There are a number of them that when they left the DA, they indicated that they are not happy with Helen Zille's return. But as leader of the Democratic Alliance, how do you plan on dealing with just the concern that black leaders often raise when they leave? And a few of them have pointed a finger at Helen Zille. And are you concerned at all about the black leaders that have been leaving the organization?
Is this the same Herman Mashaba you're referring to, who a few months before he left tweeted a picture of his arm around Helen Zille, citing her as one of the greatest South Africans? And I think you need to really interrogate when people leave. They often find any excuse that they can to scapegoat and hide the real reason that they've left. Let me move on to the second part. Well, if that's how people feel, this is a democratic outcome. I keep saying this, is that Helen is elected by the membership of the party and by the Congress floor, the Federal Council floor. She's not self-appointed, and it is the people of the party and the members of the party that have shown their particular support for her. She won her last election by an overwhelming majority from a majority Federal Council in which the majority of members are not white South Africans. Secondly, I would say that getting ready to go into national government at a national level, and certainly by taking over more provinces, as certainly the 2024 polling indicates, I think you'd be absolutely crazy not to have the most successful premier in post-democratic South Africa at the heart of that, being able to prepare you to govern. We didn't talk about a capable state in the Western Cape. We built a capable state, and that was largely done under Helen Zille. We didn't talk about growing the economy. We grew the economy. We didn't talk about clean, accountable government. It was delivered. And I think that any party that pushes that type of experience and expertise aside, particularly on the cusp of going into a position where you're going to be holding power in more centers, I think would be very foolish.
John Steenhuisen, thank you for making time for us on Newsfeed PM this afternoon.